to the American Idiots Podcast, the show where we take the hottest topics currently dividing our country and we debate them with our diverse group of hosts. So sit back and strap in, as for the next 2 hours we leave no story undebated and no politician will be spared. It's the American Idiots Podcast live on Podcast Network 49, and it begins right now. Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you're watching or listening to us from. I am Money Mike, and we are the American Idiots. Welcome back into everybody. Of course, a few housekeeping things. If you're watching us on Facebook, go ahead and give the Facebook page a like. And while you're there, go ahead and share it for us as well, if you would. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like and share that page as well. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. That way you're notified whenever we upload. And, of course, if you're listening to us on iTunes, Spotify, all of that good stuff, subscribe and leave us a 5-star review if you would. But with that being said, we got a lot to get to tonight. So let's go ahead and bring on the Manny Hispani. Manny, how you doing today?
Man, March Madness is in full effect, and I see what you did there. You waited till I took that bite of bread. That's why I had to put my head down and finish chewing real quick and swallow so that people wouldn't know, but I done told off on myself. So, yeah, it is what it is. But, yeah, March Madness is going on. Seems like the big complaint right now is the officiating. I don't know how much you follow college basketball, especially during the tournament.
Oh, quite a bit. I was actually going to ask you, because you brought it up, how much further you see the Hogs going. Gonzaga looked beatable this last Saturday.
They are. I mean, this is really going to be it. I don't see them getting past Gonzaga, but they've got the best chance to. That's their best chance to get into a Final Four spot.
Right.
I'm glad they're not facing any of the other teams. Although, man. You know, after seeing Kentucky go down, I'm like, man, maybe it would have been nice to be in that bracket. I don't know. But yeah, I was telling Erica, you know, this is what you want a bracket to look like when you're looking at our West bracket, because you got 1, 2, 3, 4 all right there fighting for the best spot. That's what it's supposed to be. And then when you look down at some of them other conferences, it's like, you know, your number 15 seed. It's like, wow, your number 11 seed. It's just crazy.
It is. Actually, I read a story about how Kentucky can become the new Virginia. Remember, Virginia lost a couple of years ago. First 1 seed to lose to a 16 seed ever. And they turn around the next year and win the whole damn thing. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how the rest of this shakes out, because at this point, I mean, we all know there's no perfect brackets left, so it'll be.
Oh, no way! If somebody has a perfect bracket, they cheat.
No, that's true. They're filling them in.
What are your thoughts on the officiating?
Man, you know, I haven't gotten to watch too much because I was in Memphis this last weekend. But the games that I saw, it wasn't terrible. It was just normal. You know, people are going to complain about officiating no matter what. No matter what's going on, if the call isn't going your way, they're gonna sit there and, you know, enemy number 1 is gonna become the person in the stripes. Kind of like,
well, I think the two biggest ones that they're looking at is the Arizona TCU game, that no call at mid court should have been a foul with the game tied, giving TCU at least the ball. I'm not sure where they were at as far as foul trouble goes, if they would have gone to the line or if it just would have been their ball there. I mean, that obviously changes things. They don't go into overtime, and that gives them the ball with, you know, a couple of seconds left. So it's definitely more likely that TCU has a greater chance being in control of the ball.
That's true. That's true. And, especially in basketball, I tend to err on, of course, when it's the Hawks or the Lakers playing, I'm going to yell at the official a little bit more. But when it's basketball, even more so than football, because of the speed of the game, I err on the side of caution a little bit when critiquing officials because, man, you got to be even quicker in basketball than you do in any other sport because the game's just going to keep rolling if you don't blow your whistle.
Right. I think the other one that really upset people was it Illinois?
I think I know what you're talking about.
The gentleman slammed the ball, and because his momentum carried him forward and he held on to the rim until he was coming back, they slapped him with a technical foul.
Which is actually a rather new rule. If you hang on to the rim in college, they do hit you with a tech.
Right. But, I mean, it's when your momentum is carrying you like that, you can't just like slam it and let go because your body's going to continue to drift into the out of bounds territory and then, run into
somebody.
Right. If not somebody, the whole goal apparatus that's holding up the rim.
Ooh.
And all of that. So, I mean, they were only 4 points down, including counting the 2 points that they got there. But by hitting them with a technical on that gives 3 shots to the opposing team and the ball, which turned the momentum of that whole game around.
And, in the spirit of that whole rule, I don't like that rule at all anyway. Kind of like I don't like the excessive celebration penalties. Let them go out there and have fun. I mean, obviously act like you've been there before, but what's the big deal about them hanging on to the rim a little bit more? Some of these kids, this is, their last game ever. And, this is, let them go out there, have fun, do what they do, and everybody's going to enjoy it a lot more.
Right.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into things tonight, Manny. So you shared a story with me over the last week in the group chat, and it actually brought up a question. Could Lviv either be the key in starting or preventing World War III? And we actually have a story from Good Morning America.
Forces striking Ukraine's city of Lviv for the first time. Our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, is there for us this morning. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning, Michael. We're about a half a mile from where the strike occurred. It was an aircraft repair facility right by the Lviv airport. That airport has been closed, of course, since the invasion. The facility was completely destroyed, although there was only one injury. Now, this is about 4 miles from the bustling city center of Lviv. Air raid sirens were sounding. We could see the smoke rising from the city center, from our location over the horizon right near the airport. This was launched by Russian aircraft over the Black Sea, about 800 miles away. 6 cruise missiles, 4 of them struck the facility. 2, the Ukrainians say, were intercepted. Of course, we have had warnings from U.S. officials there might be strikes here in Lviv. This is the first time. They don't believe it will be the last. Michael?
We hope it is the last, but we're not sure yet, Martha, as you said. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC.
Shut up, George. Anyway, so, Manny, the key here, number one, let's start off with, we've seen over the past couple weeks, and we took last week off, we've seen Russia continually, notch up the aggression. And, to make a sports reference, obviously it's the underdog versus the big power here. So there's no way that Ukraine is going to be able to win a sustained battle with Russia unless something changes.
I don't know. I can't agree to that statement, Mike. Really? I mean, we have seen them hold them off for the most part out of the major areas. Right. We have seen farmers and family people just go out there and blitz out of surprise these Russian army.
Absolutely.
And I mean, they're showing all these. They're basically saying that these Russians that they're sending are kids and don't really know how to fight, and they're getting killed off. They're halting convoys of tanks and armored vehicles. So to say that, there's no way they could stave it off if it was like a real war. I mean, they are.
Right, and that's true. So far, we have seen a very impressive resistance from the Ukrainians and even just the average Ukrainian citizen.
I'd seen a headline earlier, maybe an hour before we went on, that was talking about Ukrainian snipers are picking off generals and stuff, Russian generals.
Oh,
they're just putting them down.
And that actually begs another question. We talk about so I saw earlier that David Beckham gave his Twitter account information over to somebody in Ukraine. And we saw that other, celebrities that have tried to combat the propaganda machine that is in Russia. And unfortunately, they don't have much access to the outside world as far as information goes. But here's one that hasn't really been discussed except for once that I remember. But I don't think that is going to have as much effect on the sentiment towards this war or conflict or whatever you want to call it, as much as when the body bags start coming home en masse.
Right. That was another thing. I saw it on the news over the weekend when they were talking about, the young teenage boys that Russia's sending over to fight this war. They're not even concerned with bringing their bodies home. So you have a bunch of Ukrainians that are bagging these bodies and putting them into refrigeration cars to keep them, I guess out of respect for the dead. But I mean, they're going above and beyond to make sure there's some honoring of what's happening with these bodies when it seems like Putin don't really care.
Well, and I mean, the interesting thing, though, that they talked about was like one of the parents of one of the Russian soldiers, they weren't told that he was killed in Ukraine. They were told that he was killed doing some sort of training exercise or something. So, I mean, how believable is that is also another very interesting thought to keep in mind is, I see this happening one of two ways. Putin's either going to take control of them, whether it be, 2 weeks down the road, 6 months down the road. He's going to keep ratcheting it up until, especially the attacks and everything, until eventually he just destroys Ukraine, basically. Or there's going to be a revolution started in Russia, and,
right.
The bastard ain't going to get out alive.
Which is kind of what I'm secretly hoping. His deal with attacking Ukraine right now is he is targeting so many civilian areas that it doesn't bode well for him. Mm-hmm. The problem I'm seeing with this whole thing is, while we can sit here and talk about all the civilian areas, apartment buildings, grocery stores, I mean, all kinds of places that are very heavily civilian occupied. He had bombed one building that actually it was printed on both sides on the asphalt, "Children present."
That's crazy.
And he's bombing that building. If he does come through and takes control of Ukraine, and we talk about all of these war crimes that he is committing, how do you impose any kind of penalty, in all honesty?
Oh, well, and I mean, that's interesting. You bring up an interesting point with that. So with the war crimes thing, technically, unless I'm mistaken, and maybe this is just something Democrats used to say, but I believe George W. Bush was convicted of war crimes in the Iraq War. So I don't know if it's just literally something that is kind of, hey, you're a war criminal.
Right.
how do we enforce this? I mean, and that's the other thing, and that's the point that the question that I had is Lviv the key to either sparking or staving off World War III? How much attention do you believe, or at least getting NATO's involvement? How much attention do you believe Vladimir Putin is paying to making sure that these missiles don't accidentally go over the border into Poland and the other surrounding NATO countries? What do you think the likelihood of that happening is as well? Like, are we putting too much thought into this? Do you think he's paying a lot of attention and strategically making sure that these, missiles and attacks aren't going to go over into Poland? Or do you think he just doesn't give a damn, and if it happens,
I think that targeting software is such a basic thing that he's not worried about it going anywhere it shouldn't go, anywhere that they're not aiming anyways. But what is the difference, in all honesty? I mean, if he does hit Poland and brings us in versus to what he's doing now and why we're not going in, I don't get what the difference is.
Well, I mean, I think the big difference is going to be that, if he strikes Poland, boots are on the ground, and we're probably in Russia. I couldn't imagine. How does that work even? Do we go into Russia like we did with Iraq and we remove Putin? Or do we just go into Ukraine and push them out of the Ukraine? That's the
big question I'm asking. I mean, and this goes back to what I was just saying a little bit earlier with the whole war crimes thing. How do we enforce it? We can sit there and talk about, he's doing these war crimes and he's targeting these civilian occupied areas, but we're not really doing anything about it. So just because they happen to fire a missile at Poland, whether intentionally or unintentionally, how does that affect us in going to stop it? Yes, now we have even more of an excuse, but we've already got an excuse now and are not jumping on it.
Well, and that's the thing with this. So when I talked about his intentions, what I mean is, do you think he is actively and strategically making sure he doesn't cross that line because he knows we can't go in there until he crosses that line? Or do you think he's kind of meh, whatever?
I think he's kind of whatever, but at the same time, he is focused on Ukraine because he has his own claim to Ukraine being part of Russia.
And, another interesting thing that they've talked about is, this may not stop with Ukraine, which I don't think any of us think it's going to stop with Ukraine.
Right. I've heard that a lot, but you have to remember how this war has gone. I'm sure Putin didn't think it was going to go this way.
Oh, I think Putin thought it would be over in a week.
Oh, yeah. So even if he does take Ukraine, I don't see him immediately going after another territory.
Yeah, I could see him relaxing off a little bit, especially, and we'll get to this in just a few minutes, with what China did today. Now, again, it's kind of a small amount that they are pledging to send to the Ukraine. But, I mean, that's going to be a key factor, too. Does that mean that the relationship between Putin and China is kind of wavering? And China maybe is seeing that the U.S. ain't fucking around. Because let's be honest, none of this is about Ukraine. None of this is about anything else. When it comes down to it, it's us. That may be a very selfish or egotistical way to look at it, but I don't think it has anything to do with the Ukraine. I think the Ukraine was what was thought by the Putin administration to be an easy target, that he thought, okay, I'm going to test to see what the U.S. is going to do. And if they're going to let me get away with this, I'm going to go ahead and, I am going to put the Soviet Union back together.
Right. I can totally see that. I think that China, and this is my own belief, I got nothing to back this up. I think they are trying to help Russia, but at the same time, look like they're trying to help and stay in the good graces of the United States.
So I think I see what you're saying. They're kind of backdoor helping Russia, but in front of everybody, they're like, okay, here's some money, Ukraine.
Right.
Got you.
Meanwhile, I'm sure they're trying to plan their own offensive against Taiwan.
Right. And I mean, that's a very big question. Is Taiwan next? Are they going to be the people that are, are going to be taken advantage of like this next? Again, nobody could have seen what's happening with the Ukraine and those people's resolves. It's interesting too. A lot of people haven't been discussing this, but is China looking at the resistance that the Russian military is meeting and, not even looking at the U.S. aspect of it, saying, shit, we may run into that in Taiwan and it may not be worth it. Do you think that the resistance from the Ukrainian people may influence the Chinese government? Obviously, Taiwan a lot smaller.
I was going to say I don't think so because the majority of Taiwan is just technical. Mm-hmm. They really focus on your electronics and stuff like that. So I don't know that as many Taiwan people are apt to fight a war. Ukraine was a lot of farmers, a lot of for the lack of a better word, burly men.
Right.
That didn't mind getting their hands dirty and fighting for what they felt was right.
Right. And I mean, again, another thing that, everybody's saying it and it's 100% true. Vladimir Zelensky is giving a master class lesson on how to be a leader right now. And that can be understated how much life he's giving to his people.
And then that plays into Korea. They have targeted the U.S. in the past month with at least 2 missiles that I know of. Mm-hmm. Of course, they hit the kill switch and brought them down before they were in any significant airspace. But they have showed a willingness to at least fire missiles toward the United States.
Which is another hell of a thing. Obviously, North Korea would be on Russia's side in any conflict we get. But, we're looking at that region when to the left, I think it was you shared a story. Maybe it was me. I just remember reading it. That Iran, it was me. Iran fired a missile into the U.S. embassy over the past week. And guess what they were rewarded with? A brand new nuclear deal by the Biden administration. I
would have liked to see the particulars on that. I mean, how do you as a country fire on another country's embassy and still come out with a clean nose? I mean,
to be honest, so I'm sure there's been more than just the one person killed that was an American citizen in the Ukraine. But I know here in Arkansas, we had a filmmaker that was killed in Ukraine a couple weeks back.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I was sitting there thinking, technically that's a U.S. citizen. I wonder if that's enough provocation. I mean, to be honest.
Obviously not, because they hadn't done anything about it.
Exactly.
Despite the fact that U.S. citizens have been killed over there, despite the fact that Russia is targeting civilian occupied areas, despite the fact that Russia is targeting places that are clearly marked as being for children, it still hasn't provoked the U.S. to really do anything about it other than give Ukraine some cash and I'll start to say weapons, but I don't even know that we've sent weapons.
We've sent quite a few.
Did we? Okay.
So we just did another $6 billion, I think, recently, right after the State of the Union. It was that got bipartisan support in both House in both.
Now, of that $6 billion, how much was actually going to the Ukraine?
Very true. Very good point. I haven't seen anything saying that stuff was snuck in there, but we all know stuff was snuck in there.
I believe for last week's show, I had sent something in that talked about that, and then we wound up not being able to do the show because your work sucks.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, where is that?
Talk a little bit. Let me see if I can find that.
What I'm wondering, and you make a very good point, and you painted a very good picture there. The question is, how tied are our hands right now? Do we literally have to wait? Because I'm sure if the U.S. decided, if Joe Biden came out tomorrow and said, you know what, you guys have killed U.S. Citizens, you guys have occupied, like you said, places that are clearly marked for children, all of that, I feel like we would get enough of the world's support that we would be able to go in and at least we would get enough support to get Russia out of Ukraine. Maybe not to go in and, have a full-scale war against Russia where we invade them or anything.
Right.
But I feel like we would have enough aid. So really, how tied are our hands right now? Obviously, we don't want a nuclear war. We don't want any of that. That's a possibility. So in your mind, how tied are our hands right now that we have to wait for Russia to strike a NATO ally?
Okay, of the $13.6 billion that U.S. sent over there, I'm seeing here it's saying $6.5 billion was for U.S. costs sending troops and weapons to Eastern Europe and equipment, equipping allied forces.
Which does nothing for Ukraine.
Right. Another $6.8 billion to care for refugees and providing economic aid to allies.
Doesn't really do anything.
Great for the people coming over the border, but does not help Ukraine.
What about the people that are trapped? I thought we sent over more Stinger missiles. I could be wrong on that.
So, yeah, that's what I'm seeing as the main breakdown right there.
Which, I mean, we're already talking about over half of it isn't even, it's aid, I guess, per se, but it's not really that much aid as far as actually helping the people of Ukraine. And again, maybe that's, or the people stuck in Ukraine, I should say. Maybe that's part of the toe dancing and the hands being tied that I was referring to. Because, I mean, again, Vladimir has said anybody that actively provides them with weapons and stuff is, an enemy of the Russians. Again, how tight are our hands on this? Do you believe that we would have the same amount of support if we, or at least close, if we went into Ukraine today to push the Russians out as we would if we waited for a NATO ally to get struck?
No, I think we'd have more if an ally was struck, definitely. But, I mean, at the same time, we want to talk about all this help we're giving to Ukraine, but there you can see the majority of it is not going to the Ukraine.
You might as well not have even called that. And I mean, this isn't for me. Obviously, it had bipartisan support, but you might as well not have even said that was for Ukraine. You could have said that was aid to refugees. You could have said that was, upping our military presence in the area. But to actually assist. And
in the area being more for our allies than it is for Ukraine.
Right, exactly. And it's something that you make a damn good point. I mean, that doesn't give. So obviously we're talking half of it went to us increasing our presence in the area. And then how much did you say went to the refugees?
6.8 billion.
So we're talking 6.6 million. So actually only $1 billion went to only about $1 billion went to actual the help the people in Ukraine. Because
no, not really. I mean, because the total was 13.6.
Yeah, and you said
6.5 billion, so $6.5 billion going to equipping allied forces and getting troops over there, and then another 6.8 billion. So right there's your 13.
Actually, technically, 0.2 billion is left. I mean, and again, that sounds like a lot of money when you break it down, but it's not.
When you're fighting a war, it is not a lot of money.
Not at all. Not at all. It's insane. Okay, speaking of the Russia situation, there's been a controversy brewing over the past, I'd say it's almost been a month since she was detained. Brittney Griner, a WNBA star who plays over in Russia during the offseason, was detained when Russian security guards at the airport found how do I put this? Cartridges that had marijuana in them.
Vapor cartridges that contain THC.
Exactly. There we go. And obviously that is a crime, but a lot of people are calling her a prisoner of a political prisoner. And we have a story on Griner from NBC News.
As the war with Ukraine rages, WNBA superstar Brittney Griner remains in Russian custody several weeks after she was arrested on drug charges.
Yeah, but there are many unanswered questions regarding the incident and her whereabouts.
For more on this, let's now bring in Ben Pickman. He's a writer and editor for Sports Illustrated. Ben, good to have you with us. So first, bring us up to speed on the incident. What was it that happened, and what do we know about where Brittney is and how she's doing?
So we know that in late January, Brittney Griner last played for this Russian club, UMMKC Ekaterinburg. And we know that in mid-February, February 17th, she was detained traveling back to Russia on what the Federal Customs Services, they saw hashish oil and have subsequently booked her on narcotics charges. That's kind of what is kind of being alleged against Brittney Griner. And in the subsequent few weeks, we've seen this video, as you're showing on screen, and a subsequent mugshot photo that has been released of Brittney Griner in kind of Russian custody. But that's about all we know publicly on the matter, and that's all that's been released on the subject as well.
And what challenges lie ahead in order to actually get her back, in order to bring Griner home safely?
I mean, I think it's a big challenge, right? And the question is if this is going to take a more legal route or a more diplomatic route, a more political route. And that's something we don't exactly know at this juncture, right? There's certainly, I think, 5 to 10 years. It depends on how much oil the Russian criminal services, criminal justice system actually finds, determines the length of a possible sentence from a legal perspective. And then, of course, as you all know, involving the backdrop with Ukraine and Russia and the war that's ongoing and how the U.S. is involved, there's this potential political situation that maybe involves a negotiation of some sort. That's something we really don't know, and that timeline also feels extended. Right now, at this juncture, there's just a lot of questions about Brittney Griner and very few answers, at least publicly, that we're getting.
Ben, Brittney Griner is certainly not the first American athlete to compete in Russia. What is it that attracts athletes to join leagues in that country?
And one of the central reasons is simply financial, right? It is simply money, that you're potentially making 3 to 4 times more playing in Russia than you are the WNBA, right? This is a team, this same club that Brittney Griner is playing for, that in 2015 actually paid Griner's star Phoenix Mercury teammate Diana Taurasi not to play for the Mercury that season, right? And just sit out so she could play for her Russian club. We're talking, magnitudes of 3 or 4 times more money playing in Russia or Ukraine or Israel, France, Spain, some of the countries that other top WNBA players play for, to go overseas and basically do that in their off seasons, what we consider the off season. But in actuality, that's really where you're making the meat of your financial money in terms of salary. Of course, there are on-court endorsements and, there's brand building, so to speak, that happens in the WNBA. But the financial incentives from a salary perspective overseas, that's a huge draw for a ton of players.
Really important conversation and something we will continue to stay on until we know more. Ben, thank you so much.
So obviously, Manny, the first question that came from a lot of people when this happened was, what was she doing over there? Why didn't she leave immediately?
And I think a lot of people don't understand that. I mean, like they pointed out, when it's the off season here, they can go over there and continue to play. It does a few things for them. Number one, puts large amounts of money in their pockets for continuing their career. Number two, it keeps them in the game so that they don't have to worry about that court rust or field rust, depending on if it's one of those European football leagues or anything like that. we have the same thing in wrestling. You'll have a lot of people that will go and work Japan because you can make bigger paydays over there in Japan doing professional wrestling than you can here, unless you happen to be in like WWE or, you know, one of the lucky ones that got that good contract with the AEW.
Right. Exactly.
So the European area is known for spending a lot of money for sports figures.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, especially like you hit the nail on the head. She probably makes more in Russia than she does her whole year in the WNBA, honestly.
So the WNBA and the NBA, it doesn't matter, male, female, all of those contracts are based on fan attendance. And, you know, right or wrong, love it or hate it, crowd attendance for a women's NBA game is a lot lower than a man's NBA game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, I can't knock her for staying in Russia. Obviously,
right.
You know, the money. Here's my thing. And if I'm upset with anybody in that whole situation, again, it's the White House. Why have we not had President Biden coming out? I personally believe she's a political prisoner.
Is it just Biden? I mean, when you look at other times of war, when we've had people over there, I've seen Reverend Jesse Jackson has gone and negotiated for people to be freed. It's not just up to Biden on that front.
That's true.
My question was, because we hadn't really gotten any answers from her, is and maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, conspiracy theory. Was she actually in possession of this? Or did they just happen to find it? And, she had this.
Right. Very true. And that was actually my first thought was, I wonder if they pinned something on her because they knew she was an American and they wanted to keep her there. But again, like you said, where is the outrage? Where is everybody coming out and saying, you know, hey, you need to fucking release this woman? Like, okay, yes, she may have made a mistake in, you know, using those recreational drugs. And even in the military, to be fair, to paint a picture, and I believe you were probably told the same thing. When I was in the Air Force, we were always told, hey, if you go to another country, TDY, or you're based in another country, you're still subject to that country's laws.
Right.
So I'm sure Griner understands that she was still subject to the country's laws. But to say that they're going to keep her till May at the earliest, this is just too convenient for me.
Right.
That's
why I had the argument of, was it something she actually was carrying or was it planted on her?
Right. I mean, and it's, you say conspiracy theory, but I think it's something that literally it needs to be looked into. Because
where's Dennis Rodman? Didn't he go to China and
No, he went to South Korea or North Korea.
Okay, I remember there was somewhere. He went somewhere and negotiated the release of some people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the craziest thing. Everybody seems to be sitting there, except on Facebook, where honestly you got a bunch of people who are just talking and can't really do anything. But except for the nobodies in the world, like you, me, and everybody else in the social media world, everybody that can actually physically have a voice or do something about. Where's Benjamin Crump?
Yeah.
Where are these people that need to be fighting for her release? Even if
at least bringing it up, even if they're not trying to convince Russia to let her go, why aren't they talking about it and trying to convince Russia to at least tell us what's going on?
And that's what makes me think that you may be right, is because of how quiet everything's been. I think that I think it's something that she had planted on her. I don't think there's any way. I can't say there's no way around it, because she may very well. She's a popular athlete. Most athletes use recreational marijuana. That's just life. It wouldn't surprise me if she really did have it. But the steps in which, number one, they're taking against her leads me to believe this isn't about the damn THC or marijuana or whatever. It's because of who she is. And that's
Right.
why I think that this needs to be handled as a political prisoner, or I'll go a step further, a prisoner of war, because they know what they're doing. They know what they're trying. I believe this is another act of the Kremlin trying to goad the U.S. into doing something.
Right.
I don't know that what I can't tell you that I'm an expert on what needs to be done, but I mean, something. The White House needs to be in communication with the Kremlin, something to get this woman out of there, because I'm sure she's not being treated wonderfully. And again, she's being detained for what I believe is not an actual crime. I believe that they pinned something on her and because of who she is, and they're planning on keeping her till the U.S. comes to the negotiation table or steps up. This is, again, in my opinion, a situation where Putin's testing what he can get away with.
I agree with you 100%. Like I said, it really makes me wonder how much of it was her. I don't know how many seasons she has played over there, but I think they know the rules. I think they know how to at least get around the rules if they're wanting to do illegal activity. So the fact that they found something on her is what makes me wonder if it was planted.
Right. And again, I mean, to think about it, if you're gonna go through airport security, why are you putting it in your bag? Like,
right.
And from what I understand, the amount that they found was like really negligible. Like they were talking like residue of THC oil or whatever.
Right.
However it comes. Like that again is just absolutely crazy to me that this is not a bigger deal than what it is being made out to be.
Right.
It's absolutely sad, and I think again we can say that Brittney's been failed by the U.S. and because nobody's doing anything, or if they are, they're doing it very quietly. We'll see what happens. Okay, so we talked about it earlier. China is sending an additional, and I'm going to say this figure, and I want you to keep this into perspective. This isn't a lot of money. $1.57 million in humanitarian aid to the Ukraine. So what that essentially amounts to is they are saying that they're going to continue to play a constructive role in promoting the de-escalation of the situation in Ukraine, and they're willing to make it their own efforts to overcome the humanitarian crisis. This is after they already sent $790,000 earlier to the Ukrainian people. So again, the first thought that comes to mind is this: if you're Vladimir Putin sitting in the Kremlin, are you shocked by this? Are you confused by this? And do you believe that China has your back as much as you once did?
I have a feeling that the Chinese officials and the Russian officials have been in communication nonstop. Whenever we look at China giving money to aid the Ukraine refugees, how was that worded?
Humanitarian crisis. To aid the
humanitarian crisis. You're looking at that money going more towards displaced people, not going toward the men that are still in the Ukraine fighting against the Russians.
Right. And mind you, China has not taken that step yet to send, to send weapons and things like that. So what they're doing is they're basically saying, okay, we realize we have a humanitarian crisis. Here's some money to help the people, basically the refugees that have gotten out, kind of like we talked about earlier with the bipartisan spending bill to send the funds over to the Ukraine.
I'm going to compare it this way, Mike. Okay, it's like when we as human beings go into a forest and start cutting down trees, and we feel bad for the animals, and we put them in shelters and stuff like that to help them. But we still take all the trees. We still, populate the land. We still take over.
So you think that this is more of just a token, hey, I'm going to save face, but really I'm just doing this to get y'all off my fucking back?
I really think it's more of a, hey, I hate what's going on to you. You people that have fled, we want to help y'all make sure that y'all can buy houses over here and do what y'all need to do. We want to make sure you're still being fed while you're over there, but we're not actually going to get involved with Ukraine.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that, like I said, the Chinese officials have talked to the Russian officials and have told them, hey, we're going to send some money over there, but, we still got your back.
Right. So you don't think that this is any sort of, because I've heard, and seen Democrats take this as a win and say, oh, this is great. China's on our side now. We finally convinced them. I don't buy it either. I don't buy that China is all of a sudden this great humanitarian, amazing people that are going to change the way they operate overnight. I think that, like you said, I think that all this is kind of a show that they're putting on, trying to confuse and what's that word? They're trying to divert the attention of the world.
Save face.
And exactly. Well, we're going to help, but we still got Russia on this one.
Yeah. I've seen Big Brother, man. I've seen Survivor. I saw how side deals happen, and then you tell people what they want to hear to keep them at bay while you make these other side deals. That's really what I think is going on.
And to be fair, we talk about how is China next to invade Taiwan. What's the best way to do it but to get everybody's attention and, China helped us out, and then all of a sudden they do it. It gets a lot of people who don't look into these things and drill down deeper. It gets them off of your back, which is a majority of the world these days. It gets them off of your back, and now you get to do whatever you want. And whenever it happens, there may be repercussions, but guess what? We're already in that shit. Kind of like Russia with Ukraine. Russia was like, hey, we're not going to do it. Let's fucking do it. And then we couldn't do anything about it. Obviously we weren't really actively trying to do anything about it, unfortunately. But, that's where it is as far as that goes.
And that's 100% what I see. When they were doing their war games, and they were just trying to see what the U.S. was going to do, what the NATO allies were going to do. When we didn't, bow up and try to show that, hey, if you are coming over here, we're ready. They took that as their opportunity.
And honestly, smart strategy. Hate to give anybody a bastard like Putin credit, but smart strategy for these days. Okay, let's get into things here at home. The Senate confirmation began today for Ketanji Brown Jackson. We got a story here from ABC News kind of giving a preview of it, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what we heard today and what we didn't hear today. And there's a big glaring mistake that I think she missed out on.
And we turn now to the history that will be made tomorrow. Confirmation hearings start for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black woman nominated to the Supreme Court. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is not saying how he'll vote. Like many Republicans, he's remaining non-committal. Here's ABC's Faith Abube.
Tonight, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson poised to address U.S. senators and the nation, hoping to be confirmed as the newest Supreme Court justice. She's the first black woman to be nominated in the court's more than 230 years.
My life has been blessed beyond measure, and I do know that one can only come this far by faith.
Since that historic day with President Biden, the 51-year-old mother of two has sat down with more than 40 senators from both parties, including all members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and held mock sessions with White House staff, prepping for hard questions she might face. She'll make her opening remarks tomorrow.
Judge Jackson has been scrutinized more than any person I can think of. This is her fourth time before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and 3 previous times she came through with flying colors and bipartisan support.
Jackson was confirmed to the U.S. Court of Appeals last June, receiving the backing of 3 Senate Republicans. And while Senate Democrats should have enough votes to confirm her without GOP help, President Biden is hoping for some bipartisan support of his groundbreaking nominee. Top Republicans still on the fence.
I haven't made a final decision as to how I'm going to vote.
And those hearings could get ugly. Republican Senator Josh Hawley last week trying to discredit Jackson in a barrage of tweets saying she's soft on crime.
So this attack that we've seen over the last couple of days relies on factual inaccuracies and taking Judge Jackson's record wildly out of context.
And Lindsay, that historic confirmation hearing is set to begin here on Capitol Hill at 11 o'clock tomorrow and play out over 4 days. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is eager to get Judge Jackson confirmed before the Senate's April recess. Lindsay.
Faith, thank you. And a programming note, I'll be here joining David tomorrow for ABC's live coverage.
So, Manny, today what we saw from the nominee for the Supreme Court, she said she really hammered how she was independent in her rulings. But where I feel like she missed the mark for me is the fact that she did not go right after the elephant in the room. I think the only thing that is stopping her is the fact that she has these cases that have been overturned by higher courts in numerous times. Why not go after that? That's the only real roadblock you face. Otherwise, you kind of have bipartisan support. So why not attack the elephant in the room right off top instead of just saying, oh, well, I think if you look at my record, I make quite a few, impartisan decisions. And, I don't lean one way or the other in my decisions. And I allow the letter of the law to guide me. Why do that instead of just saying, hey, I know why we're here. I know what you guys are going to come up with. Here's why this happened. Because I feel like that at least gives you the first jab at least at it, because that's really the only thing that could stop her right now.
For the most part, politics has always been counterpunching.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go out there and throw the first punch. You react to the punches thrown.
Mm-hmm. So do you think it was a smart strategy for her to go off of her record? A record in which, like I said, is in question due to the...
Right, and you say it's in question, and we can sit here and debate that all night long, but the people that matter, that are actually asking and putting things to the test, aren't focused on that, which I find very crazy.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Again, everything but, and again... very big but everything but that, she looks like a phenomenal potential Supreme Court justice.
And then you have the gentleman talking about her being, was that Romney or McConnell that said she's soft on crime?
I did hear that.
But then you also have the other people that are overturning her cases. So apparently she was stronger on crime because she gave out a harsher penalty that wound up getting turned over.
Well, and I didn't read too much into McConnell saying that. Of course, the Republicans are going to put up try to put up at least some semblance of a resistance so that they can come back to the party and say, well, we tried, but she really was a good candidate. I believe that's what we're going to see from the Republicans.
But why say something like that? Instead of actually going for, like what you were saying, her verdict's being overturned.
Yeah, I mean,
that seems like a whole much a more likely scenario of trying to get that thrown out get her thrown out as a pick.
Well, and I mean, I'll even throw this at you that makes it even more of an oddity that he chose that line to draw in the sand, because how much actual criminal work is she going to be doing in front of the Supreme Court? A lot of what they're doing is constitutional. So for her to be soft on crime, death penalty cases, maybe? I mean, really, that's about the majority of what they're going to see from the criminal justice system. So why go that direction?
That's a good question. I mean, it really, you got to look at all these different things, man. Yes, in many areas and still nationally, marijuana is against the law.
Right.
But to find a roach in somebody's car, does that necessarily mean that there's some harsh drug dealer? And if they get a jail sentence and it's overturned, does that mean the judge wasn't doing the right thing?
Right.
I mean, there's a whole... We as people try to lump things into categories.
Mm-hmm.
And the media and politicians love to throw those categories out as a big to-do.
Especially in the Republicans, minds being soft on crime. I mean,
but when you look at the fine details, it really isn't anything.
You're right. And again, that's what I'm saying. I see a minor Republican opposition to this, but I do not see anything that's going to stop her from becoming the next justice of the Supreme Court.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw this.
I did think it was funny that dude said that she's basically been through more than anybody else. I mean, Kavanaugh went through a whole lot.
To say, that's funny to me because he's saying a fact, which is true. Every U.S. and again, this is my response to that. Every U.S. Supreme Court nominee has gone through multiple Senate confirmation hearings when they're rising up the ladder. Kavanaugh, no exception. Amy Coney Barrett, no exception. To say something like that again, I think is just they threw it out for a soundbite.
Right.
I think what we're going to see is it's going to be a pretty quick process. I don't necessarily. The only thing I'm looking for is to get answers. Why does she believe her rulings were overturned? What is she going to do in the future to make sure she follows the letter of the law to a better degree? That's the only thing I'm waiting to get an answer on. I feel like
and I don't think we will ever have those questions put to the test, so I don't think we'll get an answer.
You don't think that you don't think Republicans are going to go after that?
I don't.
That would be a grave misstep for Republicans, in my opinion, to not actually go after, let's be honest, the one thing that they need to be focused on. Awesome. Thank you. We appreciate that, Gina. But that's definitely something that I think that would be a mistake on the Republicans' part, because the American people need to have faith in their Supreme Court, number one. Like, nobody should ever be able to question the United States Supreme Court. But here we are now. If this person is allowed onto the Supreme Court as a justice, do you not start questioning every decision she's going to make?
Should.
We know that she has had all of these decisions vacated or overturned. It needs to be something that Republicans. It needs to be the key factor in these confirmation hearings. They need to come out tomorrow and say, okay, so explain to us why your convictions or your decisions were overturned by higher courts. And,
right. X percent of your decisions. Yeah.
Because definitely to be a Supreme Court justice, you kind of need to be above reproach. And unfortunately, right now, that's the one thing she is above reproach, and definitely needs to be fixed going forward.
I would also like to know their views of the Constitution and how they see it.
Very good point. And I think we're going to get a lot of that. I think obviously, you know what Republicans are going to ask about: abortion, guns, all of that. I have no problem. I like that we're going to hear her views on that. But I think there's more meaty subjects that we need to get into than just, hey, how do you believe this is going to go down? Okay, so this one that you sent, Citibank is going to join numerous employers in paying travel costs when employees are seeking an abortion in a state, and they live in a state where they, it's obviously not allowed.
Illegal.
Texas is the
I was about to say, basically going to pay you to travel from Texas to another state to have an abortion.
Exactly. And we have a story from EWTN. Here we go.
In a corporate response to states which are passing pro-life laws, Citigroup is now covering travel expenses for its employees who seek an abortion. The policy was announced in a letter to shareholders. From its annual proxy statement, the banking firm is not offering further comment. The so-called benefit began this year, making Citi among the first mega corporations to provide reimbursements for an abortion. And joining me now is Prudence Robertson, host of EWTN's Pro-Life Weekly. Prudence, welcome back. Great to see you. We have a lot to talk about today, but I want to start off with Citigroup and that so-called benefit that it's offering employees seeking abortions out of state. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yes, absolutely. It's very unfortunate that we're seeing big tech corporations, large corporations that have a lot of sway in the culture today, taking the side of the pro-abortion industry to really just exploit women, to put them in danger more and more every day. And this is simply a result of the fact that these companies, these organizations, the pro-abortion industry knows that Roe is under threat. Roe versus Wade could be overturned in a matter of months. And states are taking every opportunity that they can to enforce pro-life laws that respect the will of the people across the country. The majority of them believe that Roe versus Wade is out of step. The majority of countries around the world limit abortion, at least at some point. Here in the United States, we have no limit at all. And this is just a reaction to the fact that the nation and the world is surging towards life. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, Prudence, there's a bill being considered in Maryland called Senate Bill 669, or the Pregnant Persons Freedom Act of 2022, and it's causing a lot of concern, especially among pro-life advocates, some whom say this bill, if passed, could basically legalize infanticide. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, unfortunately, this isn't the first time we've seen a state pull a pro-abortion push as radical as this. In Virginia, before we had a pro-life governor in Glenn Youngkin, they had passed a bill to allow infanticide. Governor Northam endorsed that wholeheartedly, and it's not surprising to see a state like Maryland, which is very blue, doing the same thing. We're seeing Colorado push similar measures to really just enforce abortion on demand up until the moment of birth. And this extremism, it violates the rights of these unborn children in the womb, and it points to a deeper problem in our culture. I'm so glad that people like Monse Alvarado of News in Depth and others are really digging into what it's going to take to change the culture in these deep blue areas, because really at the end of the day, it's about understanding that these children in the womb have just as much of a right to live as you or I do, and their dignity and their humanity needs to be recognized.
Absolutely. We don't have a whole lot of time left, Prudence, but quickly, before I let you go,
sure.
Tell us what you have coming up tonight on Pro-Life Weekly.
Yes.
Oh, shut the hell up. Okay. So, I mean, I'm not as firm on them as this. But here's what I'll say on this story. I do not believe that an employer should step into their employee's personal life with such vigor, and especially to the point of financially basically bankrolling them going to get this procedure. If you want to go get an abortion in this country right now, whether I agree with it or not, it's legal in most instances. In Texas's instance, honestly, I agree with a lot of Texas's law. And basically, here's where I am. If it's not affecting the health of the mother, if it's not rape, incest, any of that, I'm sorry, you laid down and decided to make a child because you knew the risk and reward. That's like the same people that say that you should be able to get an abortion whenever you want. people who smoke shouldn't smoke. I know the risks, just like you knew the risks whenever you laid down and decided to have sex. I mean, it is what it is. So I do not think that, I'm going to be completely blunt and honest, I don't think that Citibank or any employer should be bailing out the ill-advised decision-making of their employees.
All right, Mike. I'm going to look at this the same way we were talking about masks.
Okay.
It's the company. If the company wants to throw money on something like that, by all means, they've got the ability and the wherewithal to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as AEW. You know, I wouldn't have took Orange Cassidy.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have taken what's his name? Oh, Twinkle Toes.
Marco?
No, Twinkle Toes.
Twinkle Toes.
Kenny Omega. I wouldn't have taken Kenny Omega, but there was a company that decided to pay them big amounts of money.
Right.
Right. Their money, if that's the way they want to spend it, that's the way they want to spend it.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line.
So you have no problem with them paying these travel costs for somebody that is seeking an abortion?
I have no problem with them deciding what they want to do with their money. They're not going to get my money to do it with.
Right. True.
I'll make that clear up front. I don't agree with the abortion.
That's a valid point.
But if this is what they decide to do with their money, who am I to tell them what to do with their money?
Very good point. Very good point. I didn't think about it in that aspect, but that's a valid look at it. Do you think that this is going to become the norm for companies now, or at least the bigger companies throughout the world?
Some of your companies will. A lot of them are conservative companies. There's a lot of conservative companies out there that would never go this route. And even if it gets banned in the U.S., I can see them, covering the bill to go to Mexico and have your abortion, or or Canada to have your abortion. So I don't see this as just stopping at a state-to-state thing.
Canada is not scary, but having an abortion in Mexico definitely sounds like it may not be a fun experience, so to speak.
Right.
But, I mean, definitely I can see your point. I also think, though, that, again, I guess that's kind of a stockholder's opinion thing. Like,
right.
If you own stock in this, you should be asking the question, why am I funding this? But like you said, these people are put into place and it's their money. So why the hell are we? You make a
right. And it's like when a lot of conservatives were going against Pepsi for their views on homosexuality, because Pepsi backed homosexuality and was paying money for these LGBTQ rallies and stuff like that was going on. A lot of conservatives wanted to ban Pepsi products.
Right.
But I mean, you've got to look at a lot more than just the actual Pepsi drink. What all does PepsiCo own?
Right.
So, I mean, if you're going to say, well, I'm not going to buy Pepsi anymore, but you're still going to Pizza Hut, well, you're still supporting Pepsi.
Very good point.
So if you don't agree with what Citibank is doing, then you have to make sure Citibank doesn't get your money. So you need to do all the digging to see what all they own to make sure that they're not getting your money.
And because I just bought a car today, it's not financed through Citi, but just because I bought a car today, you also got to go ahead and decline that auto loan too that you really want if it's financed.
Right.
I mean, people do have to think about these things. Okay.
Right.
Last topic before we get to the American Idiot of the Week. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is downplaying Russia's continued use of hypersonic missiles. And we have a story here from ABC News.
Well, we start with the war in Ukraine and Russia claiming to have used hypersonic missiles for the first time in this conflict, striking a weapons depot. Hypersonic missiles seen here in Russian video of a training exercise last month are nearly impossible for ground defenses to shoot down and can be fired from more than 1,200 miles away. Putin turning to the air as his ground forces stall. Russia's defense ministry releasing this video, not independently verified by ABC News, claiming to show a precision airstrike on a Ukrainian military vehicle. Tonight, an urgent search is underway after a strike on a military facility killed dozens of Ukrainian troops. These images are from Kharkiv, a city devastated by Russian bombs. Rescuers digging through the rubble there, talking to a man buried in the wreckage. They were able to pull him out alive. And here in the U.S., former Presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush showing their solidarity with the people of Ukraine, wearing blue and yellow ribbons on their lapels, bringing sunflowers, the national symbol, to a Ukrainian church in Chicago. ABC's Maggie Rulli leads us off from Lviv.
Tonight, the Russian Defense Ministry claiming their forces deployed hypersonic missiles for the first time in this war. The Russians say hypersonic missiles, seen here in this video from a February training exercise before the invasion, were used in a Friday strike on a Ukrainian armed forces ammunition depot in the southwest of the country. Russia claims they can reach targets over 1,200 miles away, traveling at 5 times the speed of sound. The missiles are difficult for defense systems to detect and shoot down. Part of the Russian arsenal of long-range missiles aimed at Ukraine. Putin relying on his air power as ground forces continue to stall.
The fact that Putin is having to use these very sophisticated, very expensive kinds of weapons where he launches from within Russia tells you just how effective the Ukrainian Air Force and air defenses have been in taking the Russian Air Force out of the equation.
The Pentagon saying Russia's fired over 1,000 missiles into Ukraine since the beginning of this conflict. A large-scale airstrike killing dozens of Ukrainian soldiers at a military facility in Mykolaiv. Verified video circulating on social media showing explosions at an aircraft repair facility near Lviv's main airport Friday. Russia firing 6 cruise missiles from the Black Sea, hundreds of miles away. Ukraine claims at least 2 were intercepted. That airstrike bringing the war into what was once considered a safe haven, Lviv, just 40 miles from the Polish border. Nearly every conversation we hear walking down the street right now is about that explosion on Friday. Lviv has already welcomed hundreds of thousands of internally displaced people. This city is at capacity right now. And now the big fear is as this war moves further and further west, where are all of these people going to go? Katerina is a graphic designer from Kyiv, now living here in Lviv. She's taken part in a weapons and first aid training course, just in case, she says, Russian forces move further west. Tonight, the U.S. and its allies warning Putin is now pursuing a strategy of attrition. This is likely to involve the indiscriminate use of firepower, resulting in increased civilian casualties, destruction of Ukrainian infrastructure, and intensify the humanitarian crisis. Block after block reduced to ruins. Rescue workers at this government building discovering a man, Vladislav, trapped in the rubble. Talking to him as they fight to reach him, he is pulled out alive. Hundreds still missing after that attack on a theater in the besieged city of Mariupol. Ukrainian officials say as many as 1,000 people were inside. These satellite images show how it once stood. Now, the building destroyed. The devastation seen from the ground. These images from the Azov Battalion, a far-right paramilitary group now part of the Ukrainian National Guard.
Look.
Elsewhere in the city, a former student walking through his bombed-out school. The tables still in classrooms.
I hope these people will pay for the crimes they have committed against humanity.
Those devastating images day after day. Maggie Rulli back with us in Lviv tonight. And Maggie, you're learning a new shipment of weapons from the U.S. will arrive in Ukraine within days.
Yeah, Whit, a senior Ukrainian official said in an interview that new shipment of weapons from the U.S., including javelins and surface-to-air missiles, will be here in a matter of days. But Whit, there was also that warning today from the Russian foreign minister saying that shipments like those will be considered legitimate targets. Whit?
All right, Maggie, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thank you.
George, stop it. Nobody wants to hear from you. Okay, so the defense secretary came out over the weekend and said that these are not a quote-unquote game changer. I think anything that Russia does at this point, adding to what they're doing, is a game changer. Because with each increase, we see that Russia's willing to go to the next step. And these hypersonic missiles, which are hard for any ground, I believe they said any ground force to stop, is going to, basically be impossible for the Ukrainians to fight off. So
right.
We're seeing just a continued thing. First thought, Manny, do you think this is a game changer? Or do you agree with Defense Secretary Austin?
It's definitely a game changer. It's also more strategic, because they are launching these from so far away.
Exactly.
The the people have been able to stop the convoys and the troops coming in. But you can't really do anything with the ships in the Black Sea that's firing off missiles and areas over across the Russia border that's firing off missiles. So it is definitely a game changer.
Well, and she even said, Russia said over the past couple days that any weapons would be legitimate targets for them. That's
right.
obvious. But still, I've often wondered this. How do we make sure those weapons don't go to the Russians? How does that work? Do we just toss them over the border and say whoever comes and gets them, come and get them? You know what I mean?
That's not the way I took that. The way I took it was they were saying that that's an obvious target for them to launch missiles at.
Okay.
If they suspect these convoys are coming in from NATO areas to the Ukraine, and they suspect that they're carrying weapons and stuff to aid Ukraine, then they're going to target those vehicles.
And also very interesting, is that an escalation to, force our hand on the NATO situation? I mean, there's so many things at play right now that for the defense secretary to say that anything isn't a game changer at this point is kind of asinine to me. It's ridiculous, and you need to be looking at everything as a serious threat.
Yeah, definitely.
Again, anything that we've seen with these with this conflict, so to speak, has been just absolutely asinine. And the Biden administration has failed at every turn. And I guess that gives us things how we're in agreement to our American Idiot of the Week. I'm going to go with the Biden administration as a whole, but I'm going to stick with the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Both of them have absolutely failed as far as foreign policy at every single stretch when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. And, they need to fix it fast. Otherwise, we may have a problem, and we may not. We're definitely not able to wait until we have another election. It needs to be fixed now.
Right.
Okay, Manny.
Roger Stone. Name sound familiar?
Vaguely.
He was actually a very pro-Trump person. Still pushing toward pro-Trump. Roger Stone actually sided with Russia, claiming that Ukraine has missile launching pads with missiles pointed at Russia, and that this is a quote now, there are in fact biolabs there in the Ukraine that are funded by our tax dollars, U.S. tax dollars, cooking up who knows what pestilence to dump on the Russian people. He basically came out and said Russia is acting defensively.
And what's funny to me is you mentioned that this guy's a Trump supporter. Does this guy not realize that if Trump was still in office, we would definitely be a lot more involved than what we already are?
Right.
And not in a negative way either, by the way.
Yeah, so the fact that he can come out and say that kind of stuff makes Roger Stone my American Idiot of the Week.
Oh, absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. Well, Manny, it's been kind of a slow news week, but definitely glad. Hopefully next week we will have more non-Russian related stuff to talk about as we get further and further into this conflict. It seems like the cycle is slowing down a little bit more, but do you have anything else before we get out of here?
Oh, I'm good. Got wrestling this weekend. Anybody out there listening, if you can catch South Central Wrestling in Mountain Pine, Arkansas, the 26th of March, we're going to have our 6-man tournament. Heavyweight champion will be in the house defending his title against Leo Keegan. So
that's going to be a good one. That's going to be a good one. Well, ladies and gentlemen, for the Manny Hispanic, I am Money Mike. We will see you guys next week.